There's one woman I often wish I could see again. Not someone far away, but the version of me from 7 years ago. If I had just 5 minutes with her, I wouldn't bring a budget or investment advice. Only one lesson motherhood taught me. It wasn't about earning more or investing better. It was about how life quietly changes the meaning of every dollar. I once thought money was only about what we could buy. Now I know it also shapes the memories we carry. My name is Clara. If I could speak to the woman I was before Mira was born, I would whisper one simple lesson about money that I learned too late. That morning, while organizing our wardrobe after Mira left for school, I found a dusty storage box hidden at the bottom. As I opened it, the scent of old paper filled the room, bringing back memories I hadn't thought about in years. Inside were old photos, movie tickets, birthday cards, and faded receipts that felt like pieces of another life. One photo showed Armand and me outside a small cafe, long before school fees, insurance, and savings became part of our lives. Behind it was the receipt for a pair of shoes I had once dreamed of owning and proudly bought. I laughed because I couldn't remember the shoes anymore, but I still remembered Armand teasing me as he took my picture. When Mira came home, I closed the box with a smile, realizing just how quietly our lives had changed. After lunch, Mira found an old photo in the memory box and asked, "Mom, who's this?" with quiet curiosity. She said I looked different, and as I told her it was before I became a mother, I found myself quietly reflecting. I discovered old tickets, vouchers, and a gadget receipt that had once felt like important milestones. Looking back, I realized I remembered the joy of finally affording them more than the things themselves. While making dinner, I wondered how much I had spent on items I could no longer even remember owning. I didn't blame my younger self because she was simply growing up, unaware that motherhood would change everything. I realized the real change wasn't how much I spent. It was how the meaning of money changed as my life changed. That evening, Armand came home early, and together we smiled as old photos from the memory box brought forgotten moments back to life. We found an old travel brochure, and with one quiet nod, Armand remembered the trip we had once dreamed about. He admitted he feared waiting too long would bring regrets, but then we looked at Mira sleeping peacefully and fell silent. Watching Mira, I realized life had given me something far more valuable than the dreams we never fulfilled. I wondered if, without Mira, I would still measure happiness by what I could buy instead of what truly mattered. After Armand carried Mira to bed, I sat with an old receipt and imagined the many different futures small purchases could have created. That night, I understood every expense had quietly been a choice about the future, whether I realized it or not. The next morning unfolded just like any other. Ever since we opened that memory box, though, I found myself looking at our ordinary days in a different way. On the way to the supermarket, I saw a young woman with shopping bags and smiled because I used to be just like her. I didn't think she was wrong. I simply realized every stage of life teaches a different meaning of money. I remembered spending hours choosing shoes, but now finding fresh fruit on sale brought me even greater satisfaction. That afternoon, Mira showed me a drawing of our home, and I smiled as I looked at it. When I asked about the cat she had drawn, she said it would make our home happier, and I noticed she had only drawn the people she loved. As I placed her drawing on the refrigerator, I realized children may not know the value of money, but they often understand what is truly valuable first. A few days later, Mira's class made a time capsule, and I helped her choose one item she considered most precious. Instead of picking a toy or book, she chose an old family photo from a simple picnic. When I asked why, she hugged the picture and said, "Because we laughed the whole time," leaving me speechless. I realized that ordinary picnic with homemade sandwiches and fruit had meant more to her than many things we had bought. On the drive to school, I wondered how often I had counted money instead of the memories we were creating together. That afternoon, I looked through the memory box again, and our picnic photo meant far more than any old receipt inside. I finally understood that while possessions fade, the moments we share with the people we love often last a lifetime. That night, I sat alone with the memory box, realizing the old photos reflected the woman I used to be. I understood that money had never become numbers alone. It had always turned into time, memories, and the choices that shaped my life. I drew 2 columns on a blank page, one for what I bought and one for what still mattered today. The expensive shoes and gadget were long forgotten, but simple dinners, family walks, and smiling photos remained. I smiled because I finally understood the real difference was knowing which moments stayed meaningful long after the excitement faded. At the bottom of the page, I wrote the 7-year reflection, reminding myself that my view of money should grow as life changes. I ended with one quiet question. Years from now, will this decision still make me smile, or will I wish I had chosen differently? The next evening, I showed Armand my paper, and with a smile he quietly read the title, The 7-Year Reflection. I told him I wasn't missing the life before Mira. I was grateful because it helped shape the mother I became. Looking at an old photo, Armand admitted he once thought earning more was enough, but now knew being present mattered just as much. I told him motherhood wasn't about always spending less, but about choosing intentionally based on what truly matters. We laughed about our tiny apartment, cheap pizza, and simple trips, realizing those ordinary moments had become our favorite memories. Armand said he hoped Mira would learn not only how to earn money, but also how to value it, and I quietly agreed. Nothing changed overnight, but we ended the evening understanding that every season of life teaches a new way to see what truly matters. A few days later, I opened our family budget notebook again. Turned to a blank page, and wrote the 7-year reflection. Beneath the title, I wrote one simple question to help me make thoughtful decisions instead of automatic ones. From then on, whenever we considered a major purchase, we paused to ask that question before deciding. The change didn't make life feel smaller. It made our everyday moments together feel richer. One afternoon, Mira laughed about the cake we accidentally burned, and I realized imperfect memories often become the happiest ones. Before putting the memory box away, I saw it no longer as a reminder of mistakes, but of how much I had grown. I realized I didn't want to become the woman I was 7 years ago, because seeing the world through a mother's eyes had quietly changed everything. If I could meet the woman I was before Mira was born, I wouldn't tell her to save more. I'd simply hug her and say, "Your life will become more beautiful than you can imagine." Mira will never remember the brands I bought, but she will always remember the ordinary afternoons when I was truly there with her. The 7-year reflection taught me that every season of life changes how we see money, and I'm grateful for every version of myself along the way. I've learned that becoming a parent changes more than your routine. It changes the meaning behind every dollar you earn. Before I end today's story, I'd love to ask you, when you look back at life before having children, what financial mistake now makes you smile because of what it taught you?